My sister was always the darling of the family, receiving everything without lifting a finger. When I saved up for my first car, she convinced my parents to take it from me and give it to her. But when she ran over a mother and her son with my car, my parents rushed to her saying, "Please stop crying, we won't let anything happen to you, your dear sister will take the blame on your behalf." My mother shouted, "You will help the family, right? That's what real sisters do, right? And if you don't take the blame, then we guess we don't have a daughter, think carefully." Dad added, "Some children just need to make sacrifices for the family." They didn't know I was defending the woman. Growing up as the older sister to Olivia was like being the understudy in a play where you never got to perform. From the moment she was born, my parents treated her like she was made of spun gold while I became invisible wallpaper in my own home. Olivia was 5 years younger than me, and according to my mother Sarah and father Thomas, she could do no wrong. While I worked weekends and summers from age 15, saving every penny for my first car, Olivia received designer clothes, the latest iPhone, and a weekly allowance that exceeded what I made in a month. When I asked for help with college applications, Dad would grunt from behind his newspaper, "Figure it out yourself, Jessica. You're smart enough." But when Olivia needed help with her middle school math homework, both parents would drop everything to assist their precious princess. I watched this dynamic play out for years, building resentment like sediment in my chest. Every Christmas, Olivia's pile of gifts would tower over mine. Every birthday party was an elaborate affair for her, while mine were afterthoughts with grocery store cake. When Olivia crashed her bike and scraped her knee, Mom would rush her to urgent care. When I broke my wrist during soccer practice, I had to wait 3 hours for someone to pick me up because they were at Olivia's dance recital. The car situation was the breaking point. I had worked at Turner's hardware store for 3 years, saving every dollar while Olivia spent her allowance on makeup and coffee dates with friends. I researched insurance rates, compared models, and finally found a reliable 2020 Honda Civic with reasonable mileage. The day I brought home the paperwork, ready to make the purchase, Olivia threw one of her legendary tantrums. "It's not fair," she screamed, tears streaming down her face as she collapsed dramatically on the living room couch. "I'm 16 now. I need a car more than Jessica does. She can just take the bus to community college." I watched in horror as my parents' faces softened with sympathy for their darling daughter. Mom sat beside Olivia, stroking her hair like she was comforting a wounded animal. "Sweetheart, don't cry. We'll figure something out." "But I want that car," Olivia sobbed. "Jessica doesn't even need it. She's just being selfish." Dad looked at me with those cold eyes I'd grown accustomed to. "Jessica, your sister has a point. She's younger and needs our support more. You're stronger and more independent. Surely you can understand that family comes first." "That's my money," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I worked for 2 years to save for that car." "And we're very proud of your work ethic," Mom said in that patronizing tone she used when she was about to crush my dreams. "But Olivia needs this more than you do. She's struggling socially, and having a car would really boost her confidence. You can save up again." Olivia's sobs intensified. "I promise I'll be so careful with it, Jessica. Please. I'll be the best sister ever. I'll even let you borrow it sometimes." The manipulation was so transparent it made me nauseous, but I watched my parents eat it up like starved dogs. Within a week, Olivia was driving my Honda Civic to school while I caught rides with my friend Lisa or took the bus. Olivia's promises about letting me borrow it evaporated the moment she got the keys. When I asked to use it for my job interviews, she claimed she had super important plans with her friends. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. Olivia had been driving for only 3 months, but she'd already received 2 speeding tickets that my parents quietly paid without consequence. I was at home studying when I heard Olivia's car pull into the driveway far too fast, followed by the slam of the front door. Olivia burst into the house sobbing hysterically, her clothes soaked and muddy. Dad rushed from his home office while Mom dropped her evening tea, both of them immediately enveloping their precious daughter in concerned embraces. "Baby, what happened?" Mom cooed, checking Olivia for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "It was an accident," Olivia wailed. "I didn't mean to. The road was wet and I couldn't see properly. They just came out of nowhere." My blood turned to ice. "Who came out of nowhere, Olivia?" She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, and for a moment, I saw something that terrified me. Not remorse or genuine accident-induced trauma, but calculation. She was already planning her escape route. "A woman and her little boy," Olivia whispered. "They were crossing the street near Riverside Elementary. I tried to stop, but the brakes didn't work properly in the rain." Dad immediately went into protective mode. "Did anyone see what happened? Did you call the police?" "I got scared and drove away," Olivia admitted, her voice small and vulnerable. "I know I should have stopped, but I panicked. What if they try to blame me? What if I go to jail?" Instead of the outrage and disappointment this confession should have generated, my parents pulled Olivia closer, murmuring reassurances. Mom smoothed her hair while Dad rubbed her back. It's okay, sweetheart. We'll protect you. Everything will be fine. I stared at them in disbelief. Olivia, did you just confess to a hit and run? Are those people okay? Olivia's tears flowed harder. I don't know. I think the little boy was hurt. There was so much screaming. The casual way she mentioned a child's injury made my stomach revolt. This wasn't the reaction of someone genuinely traumatized by an accident. This was someone primarily concerned with avoiding consequences. We need to call the police, I said firmly. And get those people medical attention immediately. Dad turned on me with a ferocity I'd rarely seen. Absolutely not. Olivia was in shock. She's just a child herself. We're not destroying her future over an accident. Dad, she hit a mother and child and drove away. This isn't some minor mistake. Mom's face hardened into the expression she wore when I disappointed her. Jessica, your sister needs our support right now, not judgment. This was clearly an accident, and Olivia feels terrible about it. Olivia nodded enthusiastically, producing fresh tears on command. I feel so guilty. I keep seeing their faces. But Jessica, I can't go to jail. I have my whole life ahead of me. College applications are due next year. The narcissism was breathtaking, but my parents nodded sympathetically. Dad pulled out his phone, and I thought for a moment he was calling the police. Instead, he called his lawyer brother, Uncle Robert. I listened to Dad explain the situation in hushed tones, spinning Olivia's confession into a tragic accident caused by poor weather conditions and youthful inexperience. He mentioned Olivia's emotional fragility, her bright future, and the family's need to protect their youngest daughter. When Dad hung up, he gathered Olivia and Mom into a family huddle that pointedly excluded me. Robert says we need to be very careful how we handle this. If no one saw Olivia leave the scene, and if the car wasn't damaged badly enough to identify, we might be able to avoid this becoming a legal issue. What about the victims? I interrupted. Shouldn't we be worried about whether they're alive? The cold stares I received could have frozen hell. Mom spoke first, her voice dripping with disappointment. Jessica, I'm surprised at how selfish you're being during your sister's crisis. Of course we hope those people are okay, but our priority has to be protecting Olivia. She's family. Olivia looked up from her position nestled between our parents, her eyes calculating despite her tears. Jessica, you understand, right? This could ruin everything for me. My reputation, my future, everything. You wouldn't want that to happen to your little sister, would you? The manipulation was so blatant it made me physically ill, but I could see it working on our parents like a drug. They wanted to believe Olivia was the victim here, not the woman and child she'd struck with my car. Over the next 3 days, the local news covered the hit and run extensively. Maria Santos, 34, and her 8-year-old son Carlos were both in critical condition at Riverside General Hospital. Maria had suffered a traumatic brain injury and multiple broken bones. Carlos had internal injuries and was in pediatric intensive care. I watched Olivia scroll through social media posts about the accident, showing no emotion except mild curiosity. When our parents discussed the investigation, Olivia would contribute helpful details about how to avoid detection, like suggesting Dad take the car to his friend's body shop in the next town over to fix any damage discreetly. The police investigation intensified when witnesses came forward describing a dark sedan leaving the scene. At high speed. They'd obtained security footage from nearby businesses, though the rain had made license plates difficult to read. Dad and Uncle Robert assured Olivia that without clearer evidence, she'd likely never be identified as the driver. What they didn't know was that my car was registered under my name and insured through my own policy, paper trails that would eventually lead investigators directly to our door. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except the image of Maria Santos lying unconscious in a hospital bed while her son fought for his life. Every news update felt like another weight added to my chest. These weren't abstract victims. They were real people with names, families, and dreams that might be destroyed forever. Olivia, meanwhile, seemed to be thriving on the drama. She developed elaborate stories about her trauma from the accident, complete with fake nightmares and anxiety attacks that only occurred when she wanted attention or sympathy. Mom had pulled her out of school for a week to recover, taking her shopping into spa days to help her feel better. The breaking point came on Friday evening. I was in my room when I heard raised voices from downstairs. When I crept to the top of the stairs, I could see Uncle Robert in the living room with my parents and Olivia, all of them looking tense. The police are getting closer, Uncle Robert was saying. They've enhanced the security footage enough to narrow down the make and model. They're specifically looking for a 2020 Honda Civic now. And they're running insurance claims data. Any Civic with recent front-end damage will be flagged for investigation. Olivia's face went pale. But they can't prove it was me driving, right? Not yet, Uncle Robert admitted. But if they start checking registration records for Honda Civics in this area, they'll eventually get to this house. We need a contingency plan. Dad leaned forward, his business mind already calculating angles. What kind of contingency plan? Uncle Robert glanced around the room before his eyes settled on the stairs where I was hidden. Well, if they do trace the car here, someone needs to take responsibility. And it can't be Olivia. She's too young, too fragile. This would destroy her life. I felt my world shift underneath me as the implication became clear. Mom followed Uncle Robert's gaze toward the stairs, her expression thoughtful. Jessica is older, Mom said slowly. More resilient. And she's technically the car's owner. Olivia perked up immediately, her tears magically disappearing. Jessica would do that for me, wouldn't she? She loves me. She'd want to protect her little sister. Dad nodded approvingly. Jessica has always been our strong one. She can handle difficult situations better than Olivia. And legally, since it's her car, she's already partially liable. I couldn't breathe. My own family was sitting in our living room, calmly planning to frame me for my sister's crime. Not only had Olivia nearly killed 2 people, but now they expected me to sacrifice my freedom to protect her from the consequences of her actions. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. If Jessica were to claim she was driving, we'd need to coordinate our stories carefully. Make sure everyone's timeline matches. Jessica would need to say she panicked, drove home, and was too scared to come forward immediately. She'll do it, Mom said with certainty. Jessica understands family loyalty. She's always been willing to sacrifice for Olivia. Olivia clapped her hands together like a child getting a promised toy. This is perfect. Jessica won't go to jail anyway, right, Uncle Robert? She doesn't have any prior record, and she can say it was just an accident. Uncle Robert looked uncomfortable for the first time. Well, given the severity of the injuries and the fact that she'd be admitting to leaving the scene, Jessica could face significant jail time. Vehicular assault, leaving the scene of an accident involving serious injury. We're talking potentially 5 to 10 years. The casual way they discussed stealing a decade of my life made me dizzy with rage. Olivia just nodded thoughtfully, as if Uncle Robert had mentioned the possibility of rain. But that's better than ruining my whole future, Olivia said matter-of-factly. Jessica is stronger than me. She can survive prison. I'm too sensitive for that kind of environment. I had heard enough. I crept back to my room, my mind racing with horror and disbelief. My family was planning to destroy my life to protect Olivia from the consequences of her actions. The sister I'd spent years making excuses for, the parents who'd shown me nothing but cold indifference, were prepared to send me to prison for crimes I hadn't committed. But what they didn't know was that I'd already taken action. The day after Olivia's confession, while my family was planning their cover-up, I had driven to Riverside General Hospital. I couldn't live with myself knowing Maria and Carlos Santos were fighting for their lives while their attacker planned shopping trips and spa days. I found Maria's husband, David, in the intensive care waiting room. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days, his eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. When I approached him, I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. Mr. Santos? My name is Jessica Turner. I need to tell you something about your wife and son's accident. David looked up at me with desperate hope, probably thinking I was a witness who could help the investigation. In a way, I was. I told him everything. Olivia's confession, my parents' plan to cover up her crime, and their intention to frame me for the hit and run. I gave him Olivia's full name, our address, and the license plate number of my Honda Civic. I told him about the body shop where Dad planned to fix the damage, and I provided Uncle Robert's contact information as the lawyer helping to orchestrate the cover-up. I also mentioned that I had been secretly recording family conversations on my phone, recordings that could prove the conspiracy. David listened with increasing fury, his hands clenching into fists as I described my family's callous disregard for his wife and son's suffering. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. "Because it's right," I said simply. "Because Maria and Carlos deserve justice. And because I won't let my sister destroy more lives." David reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Detective Cooper right now. Will you repeat everything you just told me? And will you be willing to share those recordings with the police?" I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in years, I was doing something that felt completely right. The police moved fast once they had the information I provided. By Saturday morning, they had a warrant to search our house and examine my Honda Civic. They found traces of blood on the front bumper and clothing fibers embedded in the damaged headlight. I was at my weekend job when the police arrived, so I missed the initial chaos. Lisa called me, breathless with excitement and horror. "Jessica, there are like 5 police cars at your house. They're bringing Olivia out in handcuffs." I asked my manager if I could leave early, claiming a family emergency. When I arrived home, the police were loading my Honda Civic onto a flatbed truck while neighbors gathered on their lawns to watch the spectacle. I could see Olivia in the back of a police car, and when she spotted me, her face contorted with rage even through the window. Inside the house, my family was in complete meltdown mode. Olivia sat on the couch sobbing genuine tears for the first time since the accident, while Mom paced frantically and Dad shouted into his phone at Uncle Robert. Detective Cooper, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, was taking notes while another officer photographed everything. When she saw me, she approached with professional courtesy. "Jessica Turner? I'm Detective Cooper. We have some questions for you about the hit-and-run incident involving Maria and Carlos Santos. I need to inform you that you have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney." Before I could respond, Mom rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Jessica, don't say anything without a lawyer present. This is all a misunderstanding." I looked at Detective Cooper. "I want to cooperate fully. I have information that will help your investigation, including recorded conversations. But I'd like my statement to be official and documented." Olivia looked up from her tears, her face desperate and calculating. "Jessica, tell them it was you driving. Please. You promised you'd help me." The manipulation attempt was so blatant that Detective Cooper raised an eyebrow. Dad stepped forward, his face red with panic and fury. "Jessica, you need to think very carefully about your next words. Family loyalty matters more than anything else. Some children just need to make sacrifices for the family." Mom nodded frantically. "You'll help the family, right? That's what real sisters do, right? And if you don't help Olivia, then I guess we don't have a daughter. Think carefully, Jessica." The threats were now happening in front of law enforcement, and I could see Detective Cooper taking notes with increased interest. Olivia stood up, her tears streaming as she made one last desperate play. "Please, Jessica. I can't go to jail. I'm too young, too fragile. You're stronger than me. You can handle this better than I can. Please don't let them destroy my life over an accident." I looked at my family, these people who'd spent my entire life treating me like an inconvenience, now demanding I sacrifice my freedom to protect their golden child. Mom's face was twisted with desperation and barely contained rage. Dad's eyes held the cold calculation of a man preparing to throw his eldest daughter under the bus. Olivia's expression was the most telling of all, a mixture of entitlement and panic, as if she couldn't comprehend why her usual manipulation tactics weren't working. "Detective Cooper," I said calmly, "I'd like to make a statement." The room went dead silent. Mom's face went white while Dad stepped closer, his expression threatening. Olivia's sobs intensified as she realized her safety net was disappearing. "I was not driving the car on the day of the accident," I said clearly. "My sister Olivia was driving. She confessed to the hit and run 3 days ago in this very room. My parents and uncle have been planning to cover up her crime and frame me for it." Olivia's scream of rage was inhuman. "You bitch. How could you betray your own family? I hate you. I've always hated you." Mom lunged toward me, her face contorted with fury. "You selfish, vindictive little monster. How dare you destroy your sister's life out of jealousy?" Dad's voice was ice cold. "You are no longer our daughter. Get out of this house and never come back." Detective Cooper stepped between me and my enraged family, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. "Mr. and Mrs. Turner, I need you to step back and calm down immediately." Another officer moved to restrain Olivia, who was now throwing a full tantrum, screaming about how unfair everything was and how I'd always been jealous of her. The contrast between her behavior and her claims of maturity was stark and damaging. Over the next hour, I gave a complete statement detailing everything I'd witnessed since Olivia's confession. I provided dates, times, and direct quotes from family conversations about the cover-up plan. Detective Cooper recorded everything, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Most importantly, I turned over the audio recordings I'd made on my phone during the family meetings, which would prove crucial in establishing the conspiracy. When I mentioned David Santos and my visit to the hospital, Detective Cooper smiled for the first time. "Mr. Santos said you were incredibly brave to come forward. He wanted me to tell you that your information has been crucial to getting justice for his family." The validation felt like sunlight after years of darkness. Someone thought I was brave. Someone appreciated that I'd chosen truth over family loyalty. Olivia was charged with vehicular assault, leaving the scene of an accident, and reckless endangerment. Dad and Mom were charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice and accessory after the fact. Uncle Robert, who practiced family law but had stepped far outside his expertise, faced charges for conspiracy to obstruct justice and his law license was suspended pending investigation. The media coverage was extensive and brutal. Olivia's entitled breakdown during her arrest had been partially filmed by neighbors, and the footage went viral on social media. The contrast between her privileged tantrum and the Santos family's dignified suffering created a narrative that the public latched onto with righteous fury. I moved in with Lisa's family temporarily while I figured out my next steps. The Johnsons welcomed me warmly, treating me with more genuine affection in 1 week than my biological family had shown me in years. Mrs. Johnson, a social worker, helped me understand the dynamics of scapegoating and golden child syndrome that had defined my upbringing. "You were conditioned to believe your role was to sacrifice for Olivia," she explained during one of our talks. "Your parents trained you to accept less, expect less, and give more. What you did by telling the truth broke that cycle." The weeks leading up to the trial were a whirlwind of legal preparation and media attention. Olivia's arrest had made the local news, but when details about the family cover-up emerged, the story went national. Reporters camped outside our old house, trying to get statements from neighbors about the perfect family that had imploded so spectacularly. I had to give multiple depositions, each time recounting the same horrific details about my family's willingness to sacrifice me for Olivia's freedom. The prosecution team, led by District Attorney Karen Walsh, was thorough and compassionate. She explained that cases like mine were unfortunately common in families with severe dysfunction. "What your family did to you isn't just morally reprehensible," DA Walsh told me during one preparation session. "It's a textbook example of scapegoating taken to its most extreme conclusion. You were groomed your entire life to accept this kind of sacrifice." The hardest part wasn't reliving my family's betrayal, it was facing the community's reaction. Some people praised my courage in coming forward, but others whispered that I was a vindictive daughter who'd destroyed her own family out of jealousy. The narrative that Olivia's defense team was pushing, that I was the bitter older sister seeking revenge, had taken root in some circles. Mrs. Henderson, our old neighbor, actually confronted me at the grocery store one day. "Jessica Turner, you should be ashamed of yourself," she hissed loud enough for other shoppers to hear. "Olivia is just a child. How could you send your own baby sister to prison?" I wanted to scream that Olivia was 17, old enough to understand that hitting people with cars and driving away was wrong. Instead, I quietly replied, "Mrs. Henderson, Olivia nearly killed a mother and her 8-year-old son, then asked me to go to prison for her crime. What would you have done?" Mrs. Henderson's face flushed red, but she had no answer. She hurried away, leaving me shaking in the cereal aisle. The defense team tried every angle they could think of. They brought in character witnesses who testified about Olivia's volunteer work at the animal shelter and her good grades. They hired an expensive psychiatrist who diagnosed her with post-traumatic stress disorder from the accident, conveniently ignoring that her symptoms had only appeared after she was caught. Olivia herself had been coached extensively for her testimony. Gone was the calculating teenager who'd casually discussed letting me take the blame. In her place was a trembling, remorseful young woman who claimed to be haunted by nightmares about the accident. "I think about Maria and Carlos Santos every day," Olivia testified, tears streaming down her face. "I would give anything to take back what happened. I was scared and I made terrible decisions, but I never meant to hurt anyone." It was a masterful performance, and I could see some jury members softening toward her. But then the prosecution played the recordings I'd made on my phone during those family meetings where they planned to frame me. The courtroom was dead silent as Olivia's voice filled the room. "Jessica would do that for me, wouldn't she? She loves me. She'd want to protect her little sister. And later, this is perfect. Jessica won't go to jail anyway, right, Uncle Robert? She doesn't have any prior record." The contrast between Olivia's courtroom tears and her casual discussion of my potential imprisonment was devastating. Several jury members looked physically ill listening to my family's cold calculation. Dad took the stand in his own defense, trying to portray himself as a concerned father protecting his youngest child. Olivia was in shock, he testified. She wasn't thinking clearly. As her father, it was my job to protect her from making decisions that would ruin her life. But when the prosecutor asked him about threatening to disown me if I didn't take the blame, Dad's composure cracked. "Jessica was always the stronger one," he said defensively. "She could handle difficult situations better than Olivia. I thought she would understand that sometimes families have to make hard choices. Hard choices like sending your innocent daughter to prison for crimes she didn't commit?" The prosecutor pressed. Dad's silence spoke volumes. Mom's testimony was even more damaging. She broke down completely on the stand, alternately sobbing about her baby girl Olivia and raging about my betrayal of the family. Her emotional instability made it clear why Olivia had developed such manipulative tendencies she'd learned from a master. "I gave birth to Jessica," Mom wailed during cross-examination. "I raised her, loved her, and this is how she repays me? By destroying her own sister?" The prosecutor's response was swift and cutting. "Mrs. Turner, your daughter Jessica prevented a hit-and-run driver from escaping justice. She protected the victims your other daughter nearly killed. How exactly is seeking justice for innocent victims a betrayal?" Mom had no coherent answer, just more tears and accusations about my supposed jealousy of Olivia. Uncle Robert's involvement made the case even more sensational. As a practicing attorney, he should have known that advising his family to cover up a serious crime was both illegal and unethical. His testimony revealed the depths of the family's dysfunction. He'd been so focused on protecting Olivia that he'd never even asked about the condition of her victims. "Did you inquire about the welfare of Maria and Carlos Santos?" the prosecutor asked him. "That wasn't my primary concern at the time," Uncle Robert admitted. "My focus was on protecting my niece from the consequences of what appeared to be an accident." "An accident that your niece turned into a felony by fleeing the scene and attempting to cover up her involvement?" Uncle Robert's legal career was over, and he knew it. The most powerful testimony came from David Santos himself. He described the 3 days his family had spent not knowing whether his wife and son would survive, while Olivia was at home planning spa days and shopping trips. His voice never rose above a conversational tone, but his quiet dignity made his words incredibly impactful. "My son Carlos asked me why the person who hit them didn't stop to help," David testified. "I didn't know how to explain that someone could hurt innocent people and then drive away to protect themselves. But Jessica Turner helped me understand that not everyone in that family shared those values. She chose to protect victims instead of protecting criminals." When David talked about my visit to the hospital, several jury members were visibly moved. "Jessica came to us when she could have stayed silent. She risked everything to make sure we got justice. That takes courage I'm not sure I would have had in her situation." Olivia's defense team tried to discredit David's testimony by suggesting he was too emotional to be objective, but it backfired spectacularly. The jury clearly felt that David Santos had every right to be emotional about his family's near murder. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. DA Walsh systematically dismantled every excuse the defense had offered, pointing out that Olivia's supposed remorse had only appeared after she was caught, and that her family's immediate response to the accident had been to plan a cover-up rather than check on the victims. "This case isn't about a teenage mistake," DA Walsh told the jury. "It's about a pattern of entitled behavior that culminated in Olivia Turner nearly killing 2 innocent people, then attempting to frame her own sister for the crime. The defendant has shown no genuine remorse for her victims, only self-pity about facing consequences for her actions." The defense's closing argument focused on Olivia's youth and supposed trauma, but after 6 months of evidence about the family's manipulation and callousness, it fell flat. The jury deliberated for less than 8 hours. Olivia's face went white when the foreman read the guilty verdict on all counts. She looked around the courtroom as if searching for someone to rescue her, her gaze finally landing on me with pure hatred. Even at the moment of her conviction, she still saw me as the villain in her story. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later was equally dramatic. Olivia's defense team brought in more character witnesses and her grandmother, who begged the judge for leniency. But the prosecution presented victim impact statements from the Santos family and evidence of Olivia's continued lack of remorse, including letters she'd written to friends complaining about being persecuted for an accident. Judge Patricia Morrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen enough entitled defendants to last several lifetimes. Her sentencing statement was precise and cutting. "Ms. Turner, you have shown this court that you view yourself as the victim in a situation where you nearly killed 2 innocent people through your reckless driving and callous disregard for their welfare. Your immediate response to this tragedy was not to seek help for your victims, but to plan an elaborate cover-up that would have sent your innocent sister to prison in your place. This demonstrates a level of narcissism and moral bankruptcy that requires significant incarceration to protect the public." Olivia received 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 6 years for good behavior. Mom and Dad got 3 years each for their roles in the obstruction conspiracy. Uncle Robert was disbarred and received 18 months in prison for his role in the conspiracy. Maria Santos survived her injuries but required extensive rehabilitation for her traumatic brain injury. Carlos made a full physical recovery, though he struggled with anxiety about crossing streets. David Santos approached me after the sentencing. "I can't thank you enough," he said, tears in his eyes. "You saved my family twice. Once by giving us justice, and once by giving us closure. Maria is awake now, and she wanted me to tell you that you're a hero." The word hero felt strange applied to me. I'd spent so long thinking of myself as the expendable daughter, the one who didn't matter. But maybe Mrs. Johnson was right. Maybe choosing truth over toxic loyalty was actually an act of courage. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison mail. The return address showed Olivia's name, and curiosity got the better of me. "Dear Jessica," it began. "Prison is horrible and it's all your fault. I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed the whole family. Mom and Dad don't even mention your name anymore. When I get out, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what a jealous, vindictive person you are. You were always jealous of me, and now you've ruined my life because of it. I hope you can live with yourself. I'll never forgive you for this betrayal." I read the letter twice, looking for any sign of remorse or self-reflection. There was none. Even facing the consequences of her actions, Olivia saw herself as the victim and me as the villain. She still couldn't comprehend that actions have consequences, or that other people's lives matter as much as her comfort. I threw the letter away without responding. Olivia was no longer my problem to manage or protect. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I used the money I'd saved for my car to enroll in community college, majoring in social work. Mrs. Johnson had inspired me to help other people escape toxic family dynamics, and I discovered I had a natural talent for recognizing manipulation and helping people set healthy boundaries. 2 years later, I received a different kind of letter. This one was from Maria Santos, written in careful English with David's help. Dear Jessica, Carlos and I wanted you to know how we are doing. Carlos is in 4th grade now and loves mathematics. I am working again, part-time at a library. We think of you often and are grateful every day for your courage. You chose to do the right thing when it was very hard. That makes you family to us. If you ever need anything, we are here for you. With love and respect, Maria and Carlos Santos. I cried reading that letter, but they were tears of gratitude rather than pain. Maria Santos, a woman I'd never met before the day I confessed my family's crimes, considered me family. She saw value in me that my biological family had never recognized. The last I heard about Olivia was through social media posts from former classmates. She'd been released after serving 6 years with good behavior and was living in a different state, working retail and claiming to be a victim of false accusations and family betrayal. She'd learned nothing from the experience and continued to position herself as the wrong party in every situation. Mom and Dad were released after serving 2 years. They never contacted me, which was fine by me. According to Lisa, who still lived in our old neighborhood, they'd moved to a smaller house across town and rarely socialized with anyone. Dad had lost his job due to the criminal conviction, and Mom had developed a reputation as the woman who'd tried to frame her own daughter for her younger daughter's crimes. Sometimes people ask if I regret destroying my family to protect strangers. The question always surprises me because it assumes my family was worth protecting in the first place. A real family doesn't ask one child to sacrifice her freedom to protect another child from consequences. A real family doesn't operate through manipulation, favoritism, and emotional abuse. The Santos family taught me what real family looks like. It's built on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared responsibility for each other's well-being. It doesn't require one person to constantly sacrifice for others, and it doesn't protect wrongdoers at the expense of victims. I'm in my final year of my master's degree in social work now, specializing in family trauma and recovery. I work part-time at a community center helping teenagers from dysfunctional families recognize unhealthy patterns and develop better boundaries. Many of them remind me of myself at their age, constantly making excuses for family members who treat them badly and believing they deserve less than their siblings. You matter just as much as anyone else in your family, I tell them. Your needs, dreams, and well-being are just as important as theirs. Don't let anyone convince you that your job is to sacrifice yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. It took me 21 years to learn that lesson, and it cost me my biological family. But in return, I gained something far more valuable: self-respect, genuine relationships, and the knowledge that I'd chosen justice over complicity. I'd protected innocent victims rather than enabling their attacker. Olivia may never understand why I chose the Santos family over her, but the answer is simple. The Santos family were the victims who deserved protection and justice. Olivia was the perpetrator who deserved consequences. When those two groups come into conflict, choosing victims over perpetrators isn't betrayal, it's basic human decency. I sleep peacefully now, knowing that Maria and Carlos Santos are alive and thriving partly because I found the courage to tell the truth. That's worth more than all the family approval I never received anyway.